the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
Aren't getting the opportunities and want to showcase more, and they would need to go down a level because they thought they were at this level, but they actually need to go down, and you see what that blend looks like. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with that style, and I just feel like if you're not at that point at one of these mid-major programs, or you're the G5 level, and you're not accepting just the new reality of college sports of like you're a feeder program, and don't look at it as a negative, just look at it as this is what is, and we can build with it, right? Like I just feel like that's kind of where it's going all across college sports, and these kind of rules just make it more so.
Yeah,
100%.
Switching gears here a little bit. Fact or fiction? Tennessee will close with a top 10 class, Jack Foster. And then part 2 of this question: what stands out to you most about the recruiting heater that Josh Heupel and the Vols are on right now?
Yeah, obviously they're on a heater. If you look at 247, they're 6th right now. I think with the momentum they have right now, I would bet that they would finish top 10. And what I like most about the class is just the versatility of the class. And, there's multiple different positions Tennessee was able to hit on. I mean, you go up and down the list, whether it's quarterback, offensive line, tight end, defensive line, wide receiver, safety, maybe not corner, but they have 3 in the class. Edge, they checked a lot of boxes. If you look at On3's rankings for Christian Gass, they hit big on a linebacker. So there's a lot to like about this class. There's a lot of boxes they checked. And I think top to bottom, when you look at all the positions, Tennessee kind of has a little bit of everything, which is a nice thing to have for potentially a top 10 class.
Ryan, here's your moment to shine. I feel like I need some dramatic music here because Jack knows where we're going with this, because Ryan Schumpert is ready to pour some cold water on Vol Nation here. So Ryan, go ahead.
You changed the standard. Yesterday, Chase has a headline on the podcast: Tennessee pouring to or heading towards top 5 class, or looks like a top 5 class. That is a real headline on the Chase Thomas podcast, or at least on the tweet. I don't know about the podcast itself. And that was I was going to pour some water on. Top 10, yeah. I mean, I think probably. Right now, I think by star rating, it's like 10th. Or by average recruit ranking, it's like 10th. And I think if Tennessee gets David Sanders, it'll be a top 10 class. And if they don't, it probably won't be. That's how I feel about it. And
so you're saying if they don't get David Sanders, it won't be a top 10 class?
That's my guess. Yeah. I mean, I think it probably ends up somewhere like 7 to 12. And obviously David Sanders coming is a big deal about it. My thing yesterday that I was giving you some hate for is I genuinely don't see the path to it being a top 5 class. I just don't see it. Unless they get Josh Petty too.
I was going to say, I think the path is they've still flipped Perlotti, the 4-star linebacker out of Buford. And then I think it's probably getting Darian Smith, defensive tackle, out of St. Francis. And then probably you need, because I think they're done at receiver. And then maybe Dwayne Morris, if you're able to get him, as he's trending up more in the blue chip or 4-star. It depends on who you look at. And then you probably, though, to really secure a top 5, I think you're going to need Gaston plus Sanders, or like you said, Petty plus Sanders. I think you would need both to kind of really, really be in that top 5. And also, you don't need both. Like you really, and I think, Jack, I would be surprised. I would say, I would almost say floored if Tennessee does not end up with one of Sanders, Petty, or Gaston. Things are trending too well there. Like Petty grew up a Tennessee fan. Gaston's been quiet, and Tennessee's in the final 3. Obviously, his teammate Travis Smith already committed here, and then obviously they've been trending well for David Sanders for months now. So I think there's too much there's too many good signs for all 3, and you're not going to get all 3. But that Tennessee lands one of them just still feels the most realistic path.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just don't think getting one of them gets them a top 5 class. I think getting one of them makes it close to a lock or an almost certainty that Tennessee is a top 10 class, assuming they don't do what happened last year when they got their last commit in August and then they proceeded to whiff on the next 15 targets they had during the fall. As long as
that's a good point. It seems like they've learned from what happened last year. Whatever happened last year in terms of like, because what did that class finish at? 14th, I think, on 247 last year, where there was all this optimism going into July in August, and it just did not happen. They just missed on so many key guys that they wanted in that 2023 cycle. it feels like that's not going to happen in 2024. It feels like this is going to be Heupel's best class year, Jack, right?
Yeah, well, I don't see why not. And if they get one of those, as we mentioned, feels like top 10 class. So I think you have to like the trajectory right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you're top 10, I think that's where you want to be as a Tennessee fan. Like, you just gotta, because you've been at 10, that's the highest, I believe, to this point. But if, like, you don't, like, look at who they're battling against: the Ohio States, the Georgias, the Bamas, who have picked right back up post Saban, LSU. Like, Texas is at 14th right now. Like, you look at, I mean, they're a powerhouse. Like, we'll see how they finish, but it's just brutal recruiting in the sport right now. So I think fans who look at Tennessee and are just kind of frustrated with the first 3 years, I'm like, I don't know. The winning helps, obviously. The longer Heupel's here and the more 10+ win seasons they have, that will help. The more guys who go to the draft, that helps. They need Jalen Hyatt and Tedder Tillman to have good years. They need maybe Hendon Hooker to play at Detroit at some point. Like, they need more guys to pop at the NFL level. Matthew Butler doing well.
That's a
They
good
need
point.
some of that.
That's a good
But
point.
I think by and large, they're still trending up. And, like, you want to be recruiting better than you did that first year. You want to be able to learn from mistakes from previous cycles. And I also think they're smart in where they're targeting. Like, we're not going to Florida. Like, the Kai Bates stuff, I'm hoping that's a thing of the past, where it's like, you were his favorite twice and he still didn't pick Tennessee. It's like, it's just not.
Recruiting recruiting Florida is so unfruitful for Tennessee.
Yes. Just stop doing
it
that.
Never pans out.
And it seems like by and large they're picking their spots in Georgia. They're absolutely feasting in North Carolina, which should be their bread and butter. They're keeping the guys home in the state of Tennessee that they really prioritize, and then going around the country for quarterbacks, whether it's Tennessee with George McIntyre, whether it's California with Nico, or Georgia for Jake Merklinger, or North Carolina with Faison. Like, they're going wherever the quarterbacks are. They're like, that's their priority. But I think their recruiting strategy makes a lot of sense to me in terms of where they're targeting and how they're going about it.
Yeah, I think so too. And the North Carolina one's a big one, and I think that's also where Clemson's starting to not be what they were there for a handful of years is a huge one. I mean, I think we talked about it on this pod probably in the early days of me being on here, that it was just such a hard path to Tennessee having success for it on the recruiting trail, but also just in general when you're talking about the areas Tennessee needs to go recruit. Georgia was recruiting, still is recruiting as well as anyone in the country. Now, the good news is Georgia's recruiting so well, they can recruit nationally, and there's so many good players in Georgia that, like Chase said, they've done a really good job of picking their spots. And, heck, they've won a couple battles in Georgia against Georgia each of these last 2 years. And then going into North Carolina, which has always been a bread and butter for Tennessee when they're recruiting at their best. And obviously Clemson's kind of the main team you look to compete to there. Even with North Carolina having some success, it feels like their success in recruiting trail has gone down. So yeah, I agree with that. And what you said a minute ago, back to your original question, that's what stands out to me the most about these last couple of weeks is just the teams Tennessee's beating to get these kids. It's been some real, big time battles. And Christian Gass, you beat really good teams for. Travis Smith, you beat really good teams for. Lagonza Hayward Shady Hayward certainly his top three is really good. I don't know how real the Georgia interest was, but still to beat Florida. And then, Brame, it's a kid that was Tennessee and Oregon, you don't think about them as a traditional recruiting rival for Tennessee, but they're recruiting probably in the top 5 of the sport right now. So it's been a lot of really impressive wins for Tennessee. And to me, that's what stands out the most about it.
I like it. Transitioning here a little bit, position outlook spotlight series continuing on here. Jack Foster, linebacker. What do you like most about the room in 2024? How will it continue to evolve? New face who might come on this year that Vol fans don't already know, and then your biggest question mark for this linebacker room in 2024.
My biggest, that's a lot. Okay, what I like is the upside, because Arian Carter. Everybody was so high on Arian Carter last year, and he had moments, but obviously the injury hampered his season early, and it didn't really feel like he splashed all that much early on. It felt like there was a little bit of freshman growing pains, so he could have a breakout season as a sophomore. T-Lander and Spurts last year was great, and he could take a step, and those two guys could be absolute dudes at the linebacker spot. I know we mentioned or talked about Keenan Pili last week a little bit or maybe it was on our RTI pod, actually, Ryan, where you were saying that Keenan Pili is a little bit of an unknown for this Tennessee team, just because, he's coming off of injury. He's only played one game in a Vol uniform, but I think Kenyon Pili is safe, and I like what he brings for this defense. I do think he's one of the most important players on this defense, probably second behind James Pierce. So he's a big player for Tennessee this year, and I think Kenyon Pili is going to have a big season. But with the upside of Carter and Thielander, I like, a name that might come on that, maybe not a lot of people know. I think Thielander would be the answer to that, because in reality, a lot of just not diehard fans probably aren't.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.